This is a familiar sight to many in Bangalore. Girish Karnad sets out on his morning walk. Karnad has traversed many paths as actor, director, thinker, and administrator, leaving his unique footprint in many fields. His most significant contribution has been to theatre. Karnad is ranked among the greatest playwrights in Indian literary history.
It was only when I was 16 that I realized a very important thing about my family, which was that my mother was a child widow and that she had a son and that she had become a nurse and met my father and got remarried again, and that we were children of her second marriage. But we were always brought up to believe that our eldest brother, Bhalchand, was our sibling. We were never told that he was a half-brother. My mother had a very strong influence on me, on all of us, for two reasons. One thing, because she had struggled, she was very liberal, sexually. Liberal in the way she helped widows, the way she brought up women. I remember that when I was about 35 and so on, a woman who was a cook in our house, wrote me a love letter saying, you know, I love you, you know, what can I do, and so on and so on. So I put it in my drawer and went away to shoot, and when I came back there was no letter. So I said to my mother, you know, there was a letter, I had a letter here, I had put it here, it has disappeared, what's to be done? So she said, oh, you mean that letter written by that girl? Yes, at that age all girls feel like that. Why are you keeping that letter? Are you going to blackmail her? And I have tore it up. She said. That was the end of that. She and my father were both great theatre enthusiasts. They had seen in Maharashtra, you know, because my father travelled around Maharashtra, plays by Balagandhar, plays by Keshavrao Bhole, you know, Marathi theatre. They loved Marathi theatre. Both of them used to see. I see them, and I grew up with them telling me how glorious theatre was. My father was in government service, and he retired in 1942-43 from Pune. But the war was on, so he was given an extension. And there was an extension, he had to go to Sirsi, which was then considered a malarial post. Because Sirsi had no electricity. It was in the backwoods, it was in the jungles. And one used to see Yakshagana, or one used to see company nataks and occasionally a film. But otherwise, the only entertainment was stories. You know, it was a world full of stories. And I learnt all my Puranas, all my Itihasa from those few years in Sirsi. Whatever I learnt about theatre, I imbibed from the Havyak community, I think. From being with them, from doing plays with them, from acting with them, seeing, going to Yakshagana with them, the whole lot. This is Saraswatpur. My father, when he came to Dharwad in 1952, he came and took a house here. And since then, I've had a very close connection with Saraswatpur. When we came here in 1952, there were 51 Saraswat houses with Saraswat families and 51 outhouses with Saraswat families. So this whole area was a kind of prosperous Saraswat ghetto. The Saraswats were and are an educated community, which was fortunate for me, and they believed, although they all worked under the British, they believed that India should have independence, that Indians should lead themselves, and that there was need for social reform. Mahatma Gandhi came here, for instance. He lived in this house. I own this house today, but you know, and I'm very proud that Mahatma Gandhi slept in one of the rooms here. Dr. Ambedkar came here, and he stayed in another house, that kind of stuff. And Dharwad was considered the cultural capital of North Karnataka. This is the Basel Mission School. I was a student here for 2 years after I came to Dharwad. And from here I went on to Karnataka College. A great school. There are a lot of buildings here now, inevitably. I mean, houses are being built. You can see there that a lot of new houses have come. But when I used to come here in 1957, that was exactly 50 years ago, there was nothing here except the Someshwara temple and the tank. Unforgettable moments in my life. This is the Someshwara temple. I mean, it's quite old actually, and people believe that it was built by Jakanacharya, which shows how old it is, which means they don't know who built it. And this is the temple tank. I learnt my swimming here. I used to come here at 5:36 in the morning, often without telling my father, who used to be very worried. Bendre has a famous poem, Bantanna Sanna Somara. Bantanna Sanna Somara Kanabekanna Someshwara. The festival of Sanna Somara has come and we must now see Someshwara. And this is the Someshwara temple. To anyone interested in literature, whether he was a resident of Dharwar or a visitor to Dharwar, a visit to Bendre's house was a must. In those days, of course, no one took any appointment. We just turned up and Bendre never minded it. Bendre has a poem, Baro Sadhana Kerige, come to Sadhana Keri. That was the area in which he lived, and he welcomed us. Then we would come and he would talk to us for half an hour, 45 minutes. And at the end of it, he would call his son and he would say, Bala Sakritaro. Bala would bring sugar, we would be given sugar, which was a sign of saying goodbye. And then we would go back feeling utterly rejuvenated by this exposure to Bendre's genius. This is Karnataka College. I was here for 4 years, from 1954 to 1958. I did my BA here with mathematics. For all those 4 years, I had Professor V.K. Gokak as the principal. He was a marvelous principal, a marvelous teacher. So to be here was really an intellectual honor, a pleasure. In those days, it was considered fashionable among students of the college to indulge in literary creativity, to write poems, to write essays, to write short stories and so on. It may be that people like V.K. Gokak themselves were writers and therefore inspired the people. But among those who are with me, the person who influenced my life most was Kirtinath Kurtkote. He was much older than me. I was about 18 and he was about 30. The reason was that he had not been unable to continue his education after he did his BA. He did his BA at about 20, then he taught in Gadag because he had no money, and he came to Dharwar when he was around 28 and stayed with G.B. Joshi and continued his education. And this was the one great advantage I had. Through him, I got to know G.B. Joshi. I got to enter Manohar Granthmala, which was a great honor in those days. This is Subhash Road. And in Dharwar, when I was young, Marathi was used as much as Kannada. I mean, it had the same kind of currency. And we spoke both the languages in the marketplace here, actually. And Subhash Road was the road where everyone came for a walk in the evening, particularly college students. The boys came and the girls came, and we all walked pretending not to look at each other, but of course looking at each other. Most important to me, the most important point in Subhash Road was Manohar Granthmala. Here, they were my publishers. They made me the writer that I am today. Y.N. Krishnamurthy, who was the editor of Prajavani and then the editor of Kannada Prabha, used to say that Manohar Granthmala taught Kannada readers to read Kannada literature. In the 1930s, when there was hardly any Kannada literature, Manohar Granthmala took the lead in publishing good literature. They created whole body of readers for Kannada literature and published writers like Erna Crew, like Gokak, and made modern literature possible. You see, Manohar Granthmala was my other home in Dharwar. One home was my own home, where my parents were there, but I always used to come so that I could spend time here with Kirti and GB, because I learnt my language here. I learnt my literature here. I learnt about Sanskrit drama here. I mean, the amount I've learnt is quite extraordinary. Kirti's conversation was like a machine gun fire, Bright ideas used to keep on coming from all directions, and if you're there, you try quickly to grab an idea, see what you could do with it. Another man whom I met here was A.K. Ramanujan, who would come here. Then there were people like Shankar Mukashi Punekar, and Bendre used to come here, and this was a great crucible for ideas, a very exciting place to be in, and I benefited enormously from it. I did my BA here with mathematics. Actually, I had no love for mathematics. In fact, I hated the subject. But then I was dying to go abroad. In fact, in that generation, everyone wanted to go abroad. Probably they still do. And there was no way my father could send me, because he didn't have that means to do so. So to go abroad, I had to get a scholarship. To get a scholarship, I had to get a first class. And I decided that by taking Kannada or history or English, I could not make sure that I would get a first class. The only way I could make absolutely sure that I would get a first class was by studying mathematics. So I took mathematics, I got my first class, I stood first to the university, and I got the Rhodes Scholarship. So in a way, my the idea of taking mathematics bore fruit. But now when I look back, I think it was a very good idea, because mathematics taught me a discipline. Mathematics gives you a rigor. It lets you think of various factors in a very logical fashion, And if you want to be a playwright, that kind of training is immensely useful. But if I took the Rhodes Scholarship, in those days, you couldn't fly. You had to take a ship. I had to go by 3 weeks. My father didn't have enough money to pay me back, so I would come back after 3 years. So there was chaos at home. Will he stay there? Will he marry a white woman? And so on and so on. And the parents were demanding, no, you come back to India. And I felt these people are making demands on me. All that seemed suddenly coming to life in the story of Yayati and his demands on Puru. You sacrifice your youth for me, and so on. And suddenly the whole thing poured out as a play.
ನೀನು ಅವಳ ಅಭಿಮಾನವನ್ನು ಕೆಣಕಿದೆ. ಈಗ ಅವಳಿಗೆ ನಿನ್ನ ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಂದು ದಂಶದಲ್ಲೂ ತನ್ನ ವಿಜಯದ ಅನುಭವವಾಗುತ್ತಿದೆ. ನಿನ್ನ ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಂದು ಹಿಂಸೆಯಲ್ಲೂ ತನ್ನ ಪರಾಕ್ರಮದ ಸಂವೇದನೆಯಾಗುತ್ತಿದೆ. ನಾನು ಈ ಆಟವನ್ನು ನಿಲ್ಲಿಸಲಿಕ್ಕೆಂದು ಬಂದೆ. ಆದರೆ ನಾನು ಈ ಆಟದಲ್ಲಿಯ ಆಟಿಗೆ ಎಂಬುದು ಈಗ ಗಮನಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂತು ನೋಡು.
It surprised me completely. For one thing, because I didn't know that I was so closely related to our myths. Although I was, because of Circe, thanks to Circe, it had imbibed in me. That I didn't know. Secondly, I wanted to be an English poet. I wanted to go abroad and be with T.S. Eliot and Auden and so on, win the Nobel Prize, that kind of thing. And the third thing is I wanted to be a poet, not a playwright. And suddenly this play just poured out like that. It was pouring out. I was writing it down in Kannada. And I was like a stenotypist.
ನೀವು ನನ್ನ ಬಲಗೈಯನ್ನು ಹಿಡಿದಿದ್ದೀರಿ. ನಾನು ಕೇವಲ ದಾಸಿ.
Before leaving for England, I went to Manohar Ganthamala and I gave him the G.B. Joshi, the play. And I said, here I have a play, can you read it and let me know? And he, of course, graciously said, I'll take it home, read it. After 4 or 5 days, I came back and said, have you read it? And he returned it to me and said, yes, I've read it. That our Dasya monologue, that maid's monologue in the last act, that's very touching, he said. That's it. That was the comment on the whole play. Now, the Dasya's monologue is in the corner of the play, not the main theme at all. So I assumed that, well, that's it. That's the end of the matter. My playwriting ends. So I left for England. In Oxford, there's no other world. What happens outside doesn't matter. You are a student, and that is it. You react to each other. You meet writers who are potential writers, politicians who are potential politicians. I really enjoyed those 3 years enormously. And of course, the Oxford Union, the fact I became a president of the Oxford Union, it took some trouble, was a great experience because the Oxford Union is open to London, Parliament. You politicians come. People like Randolph Churchill, people like Sir Cyril Connolly, people like Richard Crossman, they all came, spoke, and I got to know them. And I got to know how India is seen by outside politicians, by intellectuals and so on. When I was at Oxford, in my first term sometime, I got a letter from Kirtinath Kutkoti. And he said, I've just talked to G.B. Joshi. G.B. Joshi says he read your play and he told me what you've done with it, and I think it's very exciting, the possibilities. So please send me the script. But he also made a clause. He said, I hope you are not like Eugene O'Neill. Eugene O'Neill uses all these myths for Freudian purposes. And I said, oh my God, because I was very influenced by Eugene O'Neill also. I loved him. So anyway, I rewrote Yayati, sent it to Manohar Ganthamala. I got a letter saying, we like it, we'll publish it. It was published, and then once it was published, it got all kinds of response. It got very good response. I knew at that moment when Yayati got published that I was coming back. I was not staying in England anymore. I didn't want to be an English poet. I wanted to be in Kannada. While writing on drama, Kirtinath Kutkoti in one place said that we don't have any plays which treat history as contemporary. And I said, why not? Why not? I mean, I needed a subject and I didn't. So I said, let me write a historical subject. Took out a book of history and started with Mohenjo-daro and read the history book, write down Mohenjo-daro, the Guptas and Mauryas, and write down. And when I came to 13th century, I came across the story of Tughlaq. And I said, this is it, marvelous. I found the subject. Again, with Tughlaq, it was not just that he was a mad king, a person who took the capital from Delhi to the Aulatabad, but he was a king who banned public prayer in his kingdom for 5 years. Now, think of a sultan banning public prayers. He was going against the Holy Quran. He was going against his priests. Why should he have done it?
ನನಗೆ ರಾಜ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಸಮತೆ ಬೇಕು, ಪ್ರಗತಿ ಬೇಕು, ತರ್ಕ ಶುದ್ಧ ನ್ಯಾಯ ಬೇಕು. ಗಾಂಧಿ ಇದ್ದರೆ ಸಾಕಾಗಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಜೀವ ಕಳೆ ಬೇಕು.
So when I was going to Oxford, I was writing Yayati. On the way back from Oxford, I was writing Tughlaq. So I had the first draft ready as I reached Bombay. Tughlaq turned me into a kind of all-India figure. It was done in Bombay by Alec Padamsee, it was done by Alkazi there, it was done in Marathi by Arvind Deshpande, it was done in Bengali by Shambhu Mitra. Mention it, I mean, here by Simha. I must say that many things in my plays came from these casual conversations. One day Karant and I were sitting and I was telling him the story of transposed heads, Thomas Mann's story, and said, this will make a marvelous film, heads changing and so on. I said, ಯಾಕ್ರಿ ಫಿಲ್ಮ್ ಯಾಕೆ, ಒಳ್ಳೆ ನಾಟಕ ಆಗತ್ತದೋ, ಮಾಸ್ಕ್ಸ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ. And I said, quite right, he's just right. So I wrote ಹಯವದನ.
ಆದರೆ ಚಿಕ್ಕಂದಿನ ಚುರುಕುತನ ಈಗ ಹೇಗೆ ಬರಬೇಕು? ಕಪಿಲ, ನಮ್ಮಿಬ್ಬರಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಕತ್ತಿ ಯುದ್ಧ ಮಾಡಬಲ್ಲರು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಈಗ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ನನಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತು.
Ramanujan arranged for me to come to Chicago as a Fulbright scholar. At that time, there was also a condition that I should write a play, a fresh play, for the students of Chicago University, English department. And then Ramanujan told me the story of, two stories he told me. One which I turned into a film called Cheluvi, and then he told me the story of Nagamandala, and I wrote it out. I just wrote it for the undergraduates. But this is what I mean. A play, writing a play is like having a child, You can say this is the future I want for it, but they don't listen to you. They just go off on their own. Nagamandala has become a hugely successful play.
কিন্তু
কি কিন্তু?
না না কিছু না।
ও, তোমার সব কথায় তো কিন্তু কিন্তু কিসের, কি হয়েছে বলো না?
তুমি তো ওকে কালকে পাহারা দেওয়ার জন্য নিয়ে এলে।
When you're building a house, you say this is where the kitchen will come, this is where the gate will come, this is where the main road is, this is where dust will come, and so on. A play has to be planned like that. I work, chip and chisel, because I think on stage, a little look like that can suggest so much. The play that I really wanted to write, which I worked on at Chicago, did a lot of work, was Taladanda and Agnimat Malai. Because there were all these sociologists, professors. You could discuss with them Taladanda, what happened in Taladanda, what was the caste system. At that time, the mandir and masjid, I think, was taking place here. On one side, the mandir people saying Hinduism is one and we must be saved. And the masjid, the masjid episode, Babri Masjid, and also the Mandal Commission report, all that was happening. What is Hinduism, what's not Hinduism. And I felt, God, we have not changed at all. We have remained the same for the last 1,000 years, because these are the issues that Basavanna handled.
What will the John Company gain in land and gold and silver by harming my sons? There is no danger of that. The danger is they will teach my children their language, English, a language in which it is possible to consider boys of 7 and 8 as hostages of war.
Well, I directed one play of mine, only one, and that's Vadakal Bimba. And that is because I thought if I didn't direct it, no one will know what the form is. There's an image and there's the real person, and the real person talks to the image. And everyone said, image? What image? Some other actress will come there. I said, no. It has to be an image. So ultimately, me and Chaitanya and we all sat together and, we did it.
ಎರಡು ವಾರಗಳಲ್ಲಿ 1.5 ಲಕ್ಷ ಶಬ್ದಗಳ ಬರವಣಿಗೆ, ದಿನಕ್ಕೆ 10,000 ಶಬ್ದಗಳ ರಚನೆ. ನೀತಿ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ನಿನಾದ. ಶಬ್ದಗಳ ತಡಸಲು
ನಿಲ್ಸು, ಸಾಕು ಸುಮ್ಮನಿರು. ಒಪ್ಕೋತೀನಿ, ನಾನಾ ಕಾದಂಬರಿ ಬರೀಲಿಲ್ಲ, ನನ್ನ ತಂಗಿ ಬರೆದಳು.
In 1969, Karnad wrote the screenplay of Samskara, based on a novel by U.R. Ananthamurthy, yet another prominent Kannada writer. Karnad even donned the lead role in the film it was his first foray into the world of cinema. Vamshavruksha was his debut as a film director along with B.V. Karant. Since then, he has directed some of the most memorable films in Kannada, including Kadu, Vandanondu Kaladalli, Tabbaliyu Neenade Magane, and Kannuru Heggadati. Working alongside filmmakers like Satyajit Ray, Shyam Benegal, and Govind Nihalani, Girish Karnad made his presence felt in the Hindi film industry as well.
आप कौन है?
He has directed films in Hindi like Utsav, Cheluvi, and Voghar. Most importantly, some of the most reputed talents in Indian cinema first entered films under Girish Karnad. The Kannada superstar Vishnuvardhan made his debut in Girish Karnad's Vamshavruksha.
You idiot! ಮತ್ತೇನು ಅವ್ರಿಗೋಸ್ಕರ ಕಣ್ಣೀರು ಹಾಕ್ಬೇಕಾ?
Karnad even introduced the immensely talented actor-director Shankar Nag in the film Vandanondu Kaladalli. Actors Amrish Puri, Om Puri, Shekhar Suman, Sonali Kulkarni, cinematographer Rajiv Menon, art director Sabu Cyril, all first entered cinema under Karnad's wing. Girish Karnad has also played an important role in shaping the cultural policy of India. He has built and nurtured several institutions of repute, including the Karnataka Natak Academy, the Sangeet Natak Academy, the Film and Television Institute of India, and the Nehru Centre in London. And his contributions have been recognized across India and the world. He has been conferred with reputed honors like the Kalidas Samman, Gubbi Veeran Award for Lifetime Achievement in Kannada Theatre, Swarna Kamal, Central Sahitya Academy Award, Padma Shri, and Padma Bhushan. Girish Karnad has been conferred with the most important literary honor in India, the Jnanpith, for his contribution as playwright. Karnad's wife, Saraswati Ganapati, is a doctor and social activist. She works to empower women in rural Karnataka. Karnad has 2 children, Raghu Amai and Radha Shalmali.
Close to the temple Someshwara is the source of the river Shalmali. This is it, Shalmala Nadi, she's called. And when my daughter was born, I said to my wife, why call her after Ganga, Yamuna, Narmada, Saraswati, rivers which are far away? We should call her after a river which is next door to us. And Saraswatpur, where I was brought up, is just next door here. And Someshwara is there. And in the poem, Sanna Swamara, which I quoted while we were in Someshwara, there are these lines of Bendre's, which are very famous. Shalmali, Sanna Bali, Kiviyolaga, Talevali, Gari Gari Banadaga Adagi. ಗಂಗಾ ಹೊಳೆಯಾಗಿ ಸಾಗರ ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಸಾಗರಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಹೊರಟಾಳ ಗೋಕರ್ಣ ಕಳಿಗಿ ಬೂರಲ ದೀಪಮಾಲಿ ನಂದಿಸಿ ಸಜ್ಜಿಸಾಲಿ ಗತ್ತಿನ ಸಪ್ಪುಳಿಲ್ಲದ ನಡಿ. When my mother was expecting me, when she was 2 months pregnant, probably 2 or 3 months pregnant, she decided that she didn't want me. She didn't want to have another child. She already had 3. So she persuaded my father to take her to a person, to a doctor, to have an abortion. A doctor called Dr. Madhumalati Gune, and I think I shall forever be grateful to this Dr. Madhumalati Gune, because that day Dr. Madhumalati Gune didn't come to her clinic. So my mother waited half a day and then she got bored and they came home. And so my mother said, we had you, otherwise we would have got rid of you. And I was so shocked, the whole notion that there would be this world without me. I mean, you know, all blank. I felt completely blank, and my first reaction was to say, but then you have my younger sister. How can you have my younger sister if you wanted to get rid of me? And my mother said, oh, by that time I had lost interest, you know, in the whole thing. So we had a younger sister. But I tell you that when that revelation came, for about 5 minutes, the whole notion that the world could exist and I could not be there just completely stunned me. And recently I told this story to my children and they were equally stunned. They said, what, the whole world would have been there and we wouldn't have been there. So the point is that it was a traumatic experience when I think I genuinely experienced the absurdity of life.